You're doing that thing again, Mark. That thing where you look at me like you're trying to catch me in a lie. Honestly, it's exhausting. It's like living with a warden, not a husband. That was Sarah's favorite shield. Defensive aggression wrapped in a sigh of utter disappointment. For 6 months, that was my life. I was the crazy one. I was the paranoid husband who was imagining things. I was the one destroying our marriage because I couldn't control my insecurities. She was so damn good at it that for a second, I actually started looking up therapists. I thought maybe the stress at the firm was finally cracking my skull open. Maybe I was losing it. But here's the thing about gaslighting. It only works if you don't have the receipts. And right now, sitting right beneath my hand on our mahogany dining table, was a thick, manila folder. The ultimate reality check. But let's back up a second. Let's talk about how we got to this kitchen table on a rainy Tuesday night. I'm just an ordinary guy. I manage a logistics branch in Chicago. I'm not a detective. I'm not a spy. I'm the guy who forgets where he put his sunglasses when they're sitting on top of his head. Sarah knew that. She always joked that my attention to detail was non-existent. She counted on it. Sarah was a marketing director, sharp, gorgeous, and fiercely ambitious. Lately, though, her ambition seemed to extend far outside her office. It started with the classic cliches. The phone face down on the counter. The sudden explosion of late-night strategy meetings with a new regional VP named Julian. Whenever I brought it up, she didn't just deny it. She attacked. "Julian? Are you serious, Mark?" She'd scoff, tossing her hair back with that practiced aristocratic contempt she used whenever she wanted to make me feel small. "He's 10 years younger than me and happily married. You are projecting your own professional stagnation onto my success. It's pathetic, really. Pathetic." That word stung, and she used it like a whip. She made me feel like a monster for asking why she smelled like expensive men's cologne at 2 a.m. "It was a crowded bar at the networking event, Mark. Someone spilled a drink. Do I need to give you a breathalyzer test next? Should I wear a body cam for you?" She was so arrogant, so utterly convinced of her own intellectual superiority, that she started getting sloppy. She thought I was too broken, too beaten down by her mind games to actually look. But 2 weeks ago, the mask cracked. It was a Thursday. She told me she was flying to Minneapolis for a weekend conference. She even showed me the flight confirmation on her laptop screen. But after she left for the airport, I noticed she'd forgotten her iPad. And Sarah never forgets her electronics. It was sitting on the nightstand, buzzing. A notification popped up on the lock screen. It wasn't a work email. It was a reservation confirmation from the Amangiri Resort in Utah. A luxury desert oasis. 2 guests. King suite. My blood turned to ice. I didn't storm out. I didn't call her screaming. For the first time in months, the fog in my brain cleared. I wasn't crazy. I was just being hunted by a sociopath. I hired a private investigator named Vance. Best $5,000 I ever spent. Vance didn't just get photos. He got the whole damn horror movie in high definition. He tracked them from the airport to Utah. He got copies of the room service bills, champagne, oysters, things Sarah always told me were too expensive for our budget. But the real kicker? The absolute twist that made me realize my wife wasn't just having an affair, she was actively trying to ruin me? Vance found out that Sarah and Julian weren't just sleeping together. They were planning to oust me from the mortgage, drain our joint investment account using a forged power of attorney, and file for divorce on the grounds of my severe mental instability. She had been recording our arguments, the ones she purposely triggered, to use as evidence in court to prove I was unfit. She wasn't just cheating, she was trying to erase me. Which brings us back to tonight. The rain is drumming against the glass. Sarah is standing by the stove, pouring herself a glass of Pinot Noir. She looks radiant, completely unbothered, wearing a silk robe I bought her for our anniversary. "You're quiet tonight," she says, taking a sip and looking at me over the rim of her glass. Her eyes narrow slightly. "Don't tell me you're brooding over that phone call again. I told you. It was a wrong number." I'm not brooding, Sarah, I say softly. My voice is steady, cooler than it's been in a year. She sighs loudly, rolling her eyes as she walks over to the table. Look, Mark, I love you, but I can't keep living with this paranoia. It's toxic. Honestly, if you don't start seeing someone, a professional, I don't know how much longer I can stay in this house. It's not safe for my mental health. There it was, the setup for the kill. She was laying the groundwork to leave and make it look like my fault. I look at her, really look at her. The beautiful, arrogant woman I thought I'd grow old with. I feel absolutely nothing but pity. You're right, I say, tapping my fingers on the manila folder sitting right in front of me. It is toxic, and it needs to stop tonight. Sarah sneers, leaning against the chair opposite me. What is that? Another one of your little journals where you write down every time I breathe wrong? No, I smile, and for the first time in months, it's a real, genuine smile. It's the itinerary for your trip to Utah. The glass in her hand stays perfectly still, but her eyes blink once, twice. The smug, condescending smirk on her face falters for just a fraction of a second before the iron mask of her arrogance slams back down. Utah? She laughs, a sharp, ugly sound. Mark, I was in Minneapolis. I literally showed you the boarding pass. Are you genuinely losing your mind? I don't say a word. I just slide the folder across the dark wood table. It stops right in front of her glass of wine. Open it, I whisper. Sarah didn't open the folder right away. Instead, she stared at it like it was a venomous snake that had crawled onto our dinner table. She took another slow, deliberate sip of her wine, trying to buy time, trying to calculate her next move. That was her signature play. When caught off guard, act bored. Mark, this is getting ridiculous, she said, letting out a heavy, dramatic sigh. She leaned back, crossing her arms, looking at me with a mixture of pity and disgust. I don't know what kind of internet rabbit hole you've fallen into this time, but I'm not playing this game. I've had a 12-hour workday. I'm tired, and I'm not going to entertain your delusions. Just open it, Sarah, I said. My voice was dead calm. No anger, no shaking, just flat, cold reality. It's got some great photos of the Amangiri resort. You always said you wanted to go there. I'm glad you finally got to see the desert landscape, even if it was with Julian. When I said his name, the silence in the kitchen became suffocating. The only sound was the rhythmic, heavy thud of the rain against the window pane. Her jaw tightened. The condescending smirk faded, replaced by a cold, hard glare. She realized I wasn't backing down. Slowly, with two manicured fingers, she flipped open the cover of the manila folder. Right on top was a high-resolution color photograph. It was taken from across the pool deck at the resort. Sarah was lounging in a white bikini, laughing, while Julian leaned over her, rubbing sunscreen into her shoulder. The lighting was perfect. You could clearly see her face, her wedding ring, and the unmistakable expression of pure, unadulterated adoration she was giving him, an expression I hadn't seen directed at me in 3 years. She didn't gasp. She didn't cry. Her eyes just scanned the image, then quickly flipped to the next page. The next page was an itemized copy of the resort bill. It was checked out under her corporate card, but paid for in cash at the end. A desperate, amateur attempt to hide the paper trail. Julian's name was listed as the second guest. Then came the next page. Bank statements from our joint investment account, highlighting 3 separate wire transfers to an offshore LLC that Vance had traced directly back to a shell company owned by Julian's brother. Total amount? $180,000. My inheritance from my father completely wiped out. I watched her face closely. The arrogant, untouchable queen of marketing was melting right before my eyes. The color slowly drained from her cheeks, leaving her skin looking pale and sickly under the warm kitchen lights. The mask wasn't just cracking, it was shattering into a million pieces. "Where did you get this?" she whispered, her voice losing that sharp, commanding edge for the very first time. She looked up at me, and for a split second, I saw panic in her eyes. Real, raw panic. But a narcissist doesn't surrender that easily. Within seconds, her brain rewired itself. The panic shifted into a dark, ugly rage. She slammed the folder shut, the heavy paper making a loud smack against the table. "You hired someone to follow me?" she shrieked, slamming her wine glass down so hard that the Pinot Noir splashed over the rim, staining the white marble countertop like blood. "You absolute psycho! You invaded my privacy. This is illegal, Mark. You're sick. Do you hear me? You are a sick, insecure little man." She stood up, towering over me, trying to use her height and her volume to intimidate me, just like she always did. She was trying to shift the narrative. Suddenly, the story wasn't about her affair or her stealing my money. It was about my invasion of her privacy. "I knew you were paranoid, but tracking my location, stealing my financial documents." She started pacing the kitchen, her hands shaking as she ran them through her hair. "This is exactly what I've been talking about. You're unstable. You've created this entire fantasy world in your head because you can't handle the fact that my career is leaving you behind." "Fantasy world?" I asked, tilting my head. I reached into my pocket and pulled out my phone. "Is the money missing from our account a fantasy, Sarah? Is the power of attorney document with my forged signature a fantasy?" She froze mid-pace. Her back was turned to me. "Oh, yeah," I continued, leaning forward on the table. "Vance is a very thorough guy. He didn't just look at Utah, Sarah. He looked into your laptop backup, the one you synced to the home network. I have the audio files. The ones where you and Julian are laughing in bed, discussing how you're going to use my mental breakdowns to get full control of the house during the divorce. You actually recorded me crying after my dad died, Sarah. You told Julian it would be great evidence to show a judge that I was emotionally unstable." Sarah slowly turned around. The rage was gone. What was left was something much worse, a cold, calculated malice. Her eyes were empty, devoid of any humanity. The woman I loved was completely gone, replaced by a stranger who looked at me like I was a bug she wanted to crush under her heel. "You think you're so smart, don't you?" she said, her voice dropping into a low, vicious hiss. She walked back to the table, leaning down until her face was just inches from mine. The sweet floral scent of her perfume mixed with the sour smell of the wine. "You think this folder changes anything? Go ahead. Take it to a lawyer. Take it to court." She leaned in even closer, a sick, confident smile spreading across her lips. "Who do you think a judge is going to believe, Mark? A successful, respected corporate executive or a depressed branch manager with a documented history of anxiety? I've already told my friends, my family, and our neighbors that you've been acting erratic and violent. I've been building this case for a year. You have a folder. I have a community that thinks you're a ticking time bomb. If you try to ruin me with this, I will destroy your life so completely you'll wish you never woke up." She thought she still held all the cards. She thought her web of lies was too big for my truth to break through. She truly believed she was untouchable. I just stared at her, letting her venom hang in the air. "Are you done?" I asked quietly. She blinked, surprised by my lack of reaction. "What?" "I asked if you're done threatening me," I said, reaching over and picking up my phone. I tapped the screen to stop a recording app that had been running the entire time. "Because everything you just said, the threats, the admission of the forgery, the confirmation that you've been lying to everyone, just went live." Sarah's smile vanished. "What do you mean live?" "I didn't just record this for a lawyer, Sarah," I said, standing up from the chair and looking down at her for the first time. "I set up a private cloud link. 5 minutes ago, when I slid that folder to you, I hit send. That link, containing all Vance's evidence, your financial forgery, and the live audio of this conversation, was just emailed to your CEO, your HR department, Julian's wife, and your parents. The silence that followed was absolute. The arrogance in her eyes instantly evaporated, replaced by a cold, paralyzing terror. For a solid 10 seconds, Sarah didn't move. She didn't breathe. She just stood there, her eyes glued to my phone as if it were a detonator. The hum of the refrigerator sounded deafening in the silence of our kitchen. Then, right on cue, her phone buzzed on the counter. A sharp, aggressive vibration that made her flinch. She lunged for it. Her fingers were shaking so badly she almost dropped the sleek, expensive device. She tapped the screen, and I watched the color completely drain from her lips. It was a text message from Julian. "What the hell did you do? My wife just threw my clothes out the window. She has everything. The hotel receipts, the bank statements, everything. She's calling the police about the wire transfer. Sarah, answer me." Before she could even finish reading it, another notification popped up. An email from the VP of Human Resources at her firm. Subject line, urgent, suspension pending investigation. The house of cards wasn't just falling, it was being obliterated by a Category 5 hurricane. Sarah looked up at me, her eyes wide, wild, and bloodshot. The arrogant corporate predator was gone. In her place stood a trapped animal, desperate and furious. You ruined me," she whispered, her voice cracking. "My job, my career, my reputation. You threw it all away. For what? For your petty, pathetic revenge?" "Revenge?" I let out a dry, humorless laugh. "No, Sarah, this isn't revenge. This is self-defense. You tried to steal my money, my home, and my sanity. You wanted to put me in a psych ward just so you could live in luxury with another man. Did you really think I was just going to sit back and let you erase me?" She slammed her hands on the counter, her manicured nails clicking sharply against the stone. "We could have talked about this. We could have handled this quietly. I would have given you the money back." "Oh, really? Is that before or after you told the judge I was a violent, unstable psycho?" I stepped closer, looking down at her. "You see, that's your problem, Sarah. You genuinely think you're the smartest person in every room. You thought because I'm a quiet guy, a regular guy who works his 9 to 5 and doesn't play corporate mind games, that I was stupid. You mistook my patience for weakness." Suddenly, her expression shifted again. It was dizzying to watch. The rage evaporated, replaced by a sudden, desperate look of vulnerability. She took a step toward me, her hands clasped together, tears finally welling up in her eyes. It was a masterclass in manipulation. "Mark, please," she sobbed, reaching out to touch my arm. "I was wrong, okay? I was stupid. Julian, he manipulated me. He told me you didn't appreciate me. He forced me into the investments. I was scared, Mark. Please, you have to help me fix this. Call them back. Tell them it was a hack. Tell them it was a sick joke." I looked down at her hand on my sleeve. A week ago, those tears would have broken my heart. A week ago, I would have done anything to stop her crying. Now? I felt absolutely nothing. It was like watching a bad actress audition for a role she didn't understand. "Get your hands off me," I said, my voice dropping to a harsh whisper. She froze, her hand dropping to her side. The fake tears dried up instantly. When she realized the victim act wouldn't work, the venom came right back. "You think you won?" she sneered, her voice spitting fire. "You think you're safe? This is my house too, Mark. My name is on that deed. I am not leaving. I will make your life a living hell every single day until the divorce papers are signed. You will sleep with one eye open." "Actually," I said, pulling a second, smaller document from my jacket pocket and tossing it onto the folder. "You are leaving. Right now." She squinted at the paper. "What is that?" "It's an emergency restraining order," I replied calmly. "Signed by a judge 2 hours ago. Based on the audio recordings of you threatening my safety and the documented financial fraud, you are legally required to vacate the premises immediately. And look out the window, Sarah. The police are already here to escort you." As if on cue, Blue and red lights began to flash through the rain-soaked blinds, painting the kitchen walls in a cold, rhythmic glow. Sarah's eyes locked onto the flashing blue and red lights dancing across our kitchen ceiling. For the first time since this nightmare began, she looked genuinely small. The ultimate corporate strategist, the woman who always had a backup plan for her backup plan, was entirely out of moves. A heavy, authoritative knock echoed from the front door. Boom, boom, boom. "Chicago PD," a loud voice called out over the sound of the pouring rain. "Open the door." Sarah turned back to me, her lips trembling, but not with sadness, with pure, unadulterated hatred. "You planned this, every single second of it." "I learned from the best," I said, stepping past her into the hallway. I unlocked the front door. 2 uniformed officers stood on the porch, water dripping from their heavy yellow slickers. The older officer, a veteran with a graying mustache, looked at me, then looked past my shoulder at Sarah, who was standing frozen in the kitchen doorway. "Mr. Miller?" the officer asked. "We received the emergency order from Judge Harris's clerk. We're here to oversee the immediate vacation of the property by the co-occupant." "She's right there, officer," I said, stepping aside. "Her things aren't packed, but given the circumstances of the financial fraud, the judge ruled she needs to leave tonight. She can take a single bag of essentials." Sarah walked into the foyer, her posture stiff, trying desperately to regain her dignity. She looked at the officers with that same haughty, upper-class disdain she used on waiters and retail workers. "Officers, this is a massive misunderstanding," she said, her voice smooth, trying to weave one last web. "My husband is going through a severe mental health crisis. He's fabricated documents. I am the victim here. I have felt unsafe in this house for weeks." The older cop didn't even blink. He'd clearly seen this movie 1,000 times. He pulled a printed document from his inner pocket. "Ma'am, we have the judge's order right here, along with a flag for grand larceny and identity theft regarding a forged power of attorney. We aren't here to mediate your marriage. We're here to enforce the court order. You have 10 minutes to pack a bag, or we transport you directly to the precinct." "Larceny?" Sarah shrieked, her voice hitting a glass-shattering pitch. "I am a director at a Fortune 500 company. You can't talk to me like this." 9 minutes, ma'am," the younger officer said, his hand resting casually on his utility belt. Seeing that her status meant absolutely nothing to 2 tired beat cops on a rainy Tuesday night, Sarah snapped. She turned on me, lunging forward with her manicured hands raised like claws. "You ruined my life! I will kill you, Mark! I swear to God, I will burn your world to the ground!" The younger officer moved instantly. He stepped between us, grabbed Sarah's arm, twisted it behind her back, and forced her down against the hallway wall. The sharp clack of steel handcuffs echoing through the foyer was the most beautiful sound I had ever heard. "Sarah Miller, you are under arrest for making terroristic threats in the presence of law enforcement, pending charges for financial fraud," the officer droned, clicking the cuffs into place. She screamed, a raw, ugly, animalistic sound. All the elegance, the expensive perfume, the high society posture, it all vanished. She was just a common criminal getting dragged out into the rain. As they led her down the front steps, her silk robe getting soaked and clinging to her legs, she looked back at me through the open door. Her face was distorted with a level of malice that would have terrified me a month ago. Now, I just watched her. The officer slammed the squad car door, cutting off her screams. I closed the front door, locked it, and slid the heavy deadbolt into place. The house was dead quiet. The ghost was gone. I walked back into the kitchen, picked up her half-empty glass of Pinot Noir, and poured it directly down the sink. I watched the red liquid swirl around the drain and disappear. But as I wiped down the counter, my phone buzzed again. It wasn't a text from the police, or HR, or Julian's ruined life. It was an incoming call from an unknown encrypted number. I hesitated, then swiped to answer. "Mark," a voice said on the other end. It wasn't Sarah. It was a man's voice, deep, calm, and incredibly dangerous. You think you won a petty divorce battle. But you just put your nose into a federal wire fraud investigation. The money Sarah stole wasn't just yours, Mark, and the people Julian answers to, they don't use lawyers. This concludes Part 4. Ready for the final explosive Part 5, where the real scope of the conspiracy is revealed, and Mark has to play his ultimate card to secure his freedom once and for all? The silence that followed that voice on the phone was heavy, colder than the rain outside. "Who is this?" I asked, my grip tightening on the receiver. "It doesn't matter who I am, Mark," the voice replied, smooth as silk and totally devoid of emotion. "What matters is that the $180,000 Sarah moved wasn't just sitting in a regular account. Julian was using your inheritance to clean money for some very powerful people in the city. Now that account is flagged, frozen by the feds because of your little stunt tonight. You wanted to hurt your wife. Congratulations, you did. But you also broke a very expensive machine." The line clicked. Dead. I stood there in the quiet kitchen, the red and blue police lights fading down the street. My heart was hammering against my ribs. For a split second, that old feeling crept back in, that choking panic Sarah had spent months feeding me, the feeling that I was outmatched, small, and helpless. But then I looked at the manila folder still resting on the table. No, I thought. No more playing the victim. Sarah thought I was a fool because I worked in logistics. But what she never understood about logistics is that it's all about tracking the chain of custody. You see where something starts, you see where it goes, and you see exactly who touches it along the way. I didn't panic. I called Vance. "Vance," I said when he picked up on the second ring, "the trap just got bigger. I need the deep-tier drive files, the ones you pulled from Julian's secondary server, the stuff we were saving for federal court." Vance chuckled over the line, the sound of a man who loved chaos. "Already ahead of you, Mark. I saw the flash alerts on the account. I just zipped the full ledger. It's got names, shell companies, and the routing numbers for 3 prominent city officials. Julian wasn't a mastermind. He was just a glorified bagman with a nice haircut." "Send it to the federal prosecutor's office in Chicago," I said. "Directly to the Financial Crimes Division. Put my name on it as the whistleblower." "You sure about that, man?" "That puts you right in the crosshairs," Vance warned, his tone turning serious. "I'm already in the crosshairs, Vance. But in America, nobody touches a government witness while a federal grand jury is forming. It's the safest place in the world to hide." 2 days later, the storm had completely passed, leaving a bright, crisp Chicago morning. I sat in a glass-walled conference room on the top floor of the Dirksen Federal Building. Across from me sat 2 FBI agents and an assistant U.S. attorney. To my left was my legal counsel. The prosecutor flipped through the documents Vance and I had compiled. It wasn't just a divorce file anymore. It was a roadmap to a multi-million-dollar racketeering operation. "Mr. Miller," the prosecutor said, looking up from the paperwork with a look of genuine respect, "your wife and her associate, Julian Vance, are currently being held without bail. The evidence you provided doesn't just clear you of any wrongdoing. It effectively dismantles an entire illicit network operating out of the loop. You've given us everything." "I just wanted my life back," I said simply. "Well, you got it back. Your inheritance has been ordered to be released from the frozen accounts and returned to you in full. As for your wife, with the forgery, identity theft, and now federal conspiracy charges, she's looking at 20 years minimum." A week later, I visited Sarah at the Cook County Jail. I didn't have to go, but I needed to see it with my own eyes. I needed the final page of the folder to be closed. She walked into the visitor's room wearing a drab, oversized orange jumpsuit. Her hair was greasy, her face pale, completely devoid of the expensive makeup and corporate armor she used to wear like a weapon. She sat down behind the plexiglass, looking at me. The arrogance was entirely gone, replaced by a hollow, broken look. But when she picked up the phone, she still tried to spit a little venom. "You think you're a hero, Mark?" she whispered into the receiver. "You ruined us. You threw away everything we built." "No, Sarah," I said, my voice completely calm, completely at peace. "You threw it away the second you decided to make me the villain in your story. You wanted to convince me I was crazy so you could steal my life. But the truth is, I was never paranoid. I was just paying attention." I didn't wait for her to reply. I hung up the phone, stood up, and walked out into the warm afternoon sun. For the first time in a very long time, the air felt clean. The gaslighting was over. The truth had won. And I was finally free.